Please do that. Well, again, good morning, Brian DiNapoli with the RPH program, and all of you reached out to me about maybe being an RPH provider, and I mentioned that program, we're only accepting providers that can house the sex offender population.
I can't hear. You can't talk.
You can call me after the meeting if you have any questions. There will be a presentation. So yeah, it sounds like others are hearing me, but if you could try to turn up the volume. But we're going to have a presenter this morning, Miss Arlena Williams. She's going to give an overview of how to become an ESG Cv landlord. I briefly talked to you about that program a few weeks ago, and we've been in touch. So Arlena, I'm going to turn it over to you if you are ready.
Yes, I was actually ready and logged in, and then I started having some technical difficulties. As you can see, Teams does what Teams wants to do. So before I get started, everyone, I just want to say good morning. I am Arlena Williams. I am the ESG Cv, which is the CARES Emergency Solutions Grant Program Community Liaison. And so what I do is I do a number of things, but for the purpose of this meeting, I'll be explaining to you all the ESG Cv program as it relates to how you all can become a part of it, by being a landlord. And so if you'll give me one moment, I'm going to share my screen and we'll start the presentation. And also for those who are having trouble hearing, or if you're having trouble hearing, this presentation is recorded, and we are also going to send emails of this presentation. So if you would like to get this presentation emailed to you, just let us know. And Brian, I'm not sure if with this group, if you have their email addresses, but if so, we can send an email.
Press a little bit.
I do have their emails, and we can do that. So if you are having difficulties hearing us, this will be emailed out, and I believe we can share the recording if there's any issues. So, but thank you so much. I do have everyone's email.
Okay, thank you, Brian. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to either type them in the chat or raise your hand as I'm going along, and I will answer those. But I see someone has asked a question about the acronym. I'm about to explain that right now. And Brian, since I can't see the chat, if as I'm going through the slides, you see a question pop up, just let me know, because I know sometimes I like to answer the questions as I'm going so that I don't forget or the person doesn't forget their question. Okay, so if there is nothing else, I'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Arlena Williams, and my contact information is here on this screen, my email, my office, and my cell number. So you'll have access to this PowerPoint, and you'll be able to contact me if you decide you have any questions after we meet. I'll be available to answer those for you. And also, please mute yourself. Unless you're asking a question. So the CARES Act was designed to provide homeless assistance funds. Hold on one second. Okay. So the CARES Act was designed to provide homeless assistance funds to prevent, prepare
Excuse me.
Yes.
May I ask a question? I'm so sorry. I am on my phone and I am wanting to get on the Microsoft Teams on my laptop, and I don't have a join with the code. Is there a code somewhere on this website? I mean, on the email?
Yes, ma'am. It should have been sent out. It was sent out when you accepted the request to join.
Okay.
It is. I can give it to you right now if you want.
Please, please.
Yeah, it is 119.
Okay.
494.
I think that's what I have. Okay.
718 pound. Also, yeah, you can call me after if anyone's having issues with accessing this. You can contact us and we'll provide this. But thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I apologize.
All righty, no problem. And so Again, this is the CARES Act is to provide homeless assistance funds to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID among individuals and families who are homeless or receiving homeless assistance, and to support additional assistance programs. And so if you really want to get a better understanding or read some more literature about the CARES Act, I have provided a link here in this slide, and you can take a look at that link. But the main thing that I want to point out when I'm speaking about things today, the programs, the project types that I'll speak about, they are all designed to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID. And so I just like to, emphasize that so that everyone can keep that in mind as we're moving along. And so what is the Emergency Solutions Grant? Someone asked in the beginning, what does that acronym mean? And so it means ESG is Emergency Solutions Grant, and then the CV part is related to what I just stated about prevent, prepare, and respond to coronavirus. And so we have an ESG program and we have an ESG CV program. Today, I'll be specifically speaking about the ESG CV program, meaning the program designed to respond, prevent, prepare, prevent, and respond to COVID. And so there is an ESG fact sheet. I've provided that link here. At your leisure, you can always go in, take a look at the fact sheet. I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence. You can read through the slide. I just wanted to give a general overview of the Emergency Solutions Grant so that when you're thinking about ESGCV, you'll have an idea of the background. And so, of course, the population that we are working with is going to be homeless individuals, or I should say individuals experiencing homelessness. And so the first definition I have is individuals and families who lack a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence, and includes a subset for an individual who resided in an emergency shelter, a place not meant for human habitation, and who is exiting an institution where he or she temporarily resided. And so what that means is, of course, you've got individuals who have lived in a shelter, or I should say had a temporary stay at a shelter. And also those individuals in places not meant for human habitations. You're thinking cars, under bridges, in the woods. We like to call some of those places tent cities, where they congregate and, they have tents and other things, but these places do not have running water, power, places to prepare and store food. They're just not meant for human habitation. And so that's one of the definitions. Another definition is individuals and families who will imminently lose their nighttime residence. And that just means someone who is about to become evicted, or, if they're staying with a family member and a family member provides documentation that this person has X amount of days to leave my property. And so those individuals will qualify under the HUD's definition of homelessness. Another definition of homelessness is homeless under other statutes, unaccompanied youth under the age of 25. And for this definition, the agencies, and I will, tie in how agencies factor in here, but the agencies that you all will be connecting to or collaborating with, they will determine the youth's homelessness status. It will not be up to the youth. Like, the youth will not have to provide the additional documentation and information that adults over 25 would have to provide. The agency will be responsible for that. So this is the definition for the homeless youth. And also individuals and families who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or other dangerous or life-threatening conditions that relate to violence against the individual or family member. So, you have men and women, families who are fleeing any dangerous situation. They would be they would be considered homeless by these definitions. And so before I talk about financial services, I just want to take a brief pause and just say that I've mentioned, briefly what the Emergency Solutions Grant coronavirus, so the CARES grant is. For you, how this relates to you all is we're going to give you and provide to you a list of agencies by counties, so that you'll know what counties these agencies cover. And the process is, the agencies will screen and determine if the individuals experiencing homelessness meet the criteria for their program. These agencies are funded by the ESG Cv dollars that I mentioned before. They are implementing either street outreach, emergency shelter, or rapid rehousing or homelessness prevention. And so I wanted to mention that because when I talk about financial services, the agencies are going to enroll the individuals experiencing homelessness and link them to you all as the landlords, because you have the placement in the properties where these individuals can reside. And of course, I'm going to go through this step by step, but I just wanted to kind of set that up for you all so you'll have an idea of exactly what I'm talking about. And so the agency will be responsible for rental application fees, and that means an application fee that is charged by the landlord to all the participants. They will cover that. They'll cover client admin fees if applicable, so additional fees charged to all applicants based on credit and rental history. They'll also cover security deposits equal to no more than 3 months rent. And so that means, the last month's rent, the security deposit, the first month's rent, all of those things are services that the agency can provide to the tenant. And so these are things that you would not have to be concerned about if they give you a call and say, hey, Mr. Smith, I have a tenant here. I've already screened this tenant. I feel they'll be a good fit for your property. We are going to provide the application fee, the admin fee, the security deposits, last month's rents, etc. The agency will be responsible for those things. Additionally, if the tenant has any moving costs, truck rental, a moving company, sometimes storage, believe it or not, even though an individual may be homeless, or an imminent risk of becoming homeless, they may have clothing or other items that they don't want to be discarded or thrown on the streets, and so they can provide that service up to a certain amount. Also, utility deposits, standard utility deposits. Let me say, it has to be gas, electric, water, sewage. There will be no utility deposits for a phone bill, cable, or internet. In some instances, if the individual needs internet service or phone service for a job, there are some things that the agency can work out to assist them, but that would be on a case-by-case basis. And then for utility payments, up to 12 months of utility payments per participant per service, including up to 6 months of arrears per service. And so up to 12 months per participant per service means you can get up to 12 months of assistance with your gas, up to 12 months of assistance with your electric. It's not combined. It's each utility service you can get up to 12 months of assistance. And so I like to include this in the presentation because if there are any concerns about, well, maybe they can pay their rent, but what if their job or, they just started working, so for the first few months, they'll have difficulty keeping the utilities on. Well, then the agency will assist that individual with the utilities as well. And so, most standard leases are about 12 months, some 18 months. So you can find some comfort in knowing that when you work with these agencies, these are the financial services they'll be providing up to 12 months. So this gives that individual experiencing homelessness the time they need to transition back into being independent and living in places that are meant for humans to live. And so these are some of the services that they will get. They'll also get things like case management, which means they'll get wraparound services. So that case manager is not only going to just say, hey, I'm going to place you in housing. I have an agreement with Mr. Smith, but they're also going to check in on them every month, make sure if they're supposed to be looking for jobs, if they're actually doing it, if they're having any other difficulties, if they have any, if they're on any kind of medication or need some type of medical help, anything like that. Case management includes all of those things. The case manager will be responsible for checking in on this individual and making sure their needs are met, which, in the long term secures or gives you that security that they'll be able to sustain their, apartment, house, or whatever it is whatever type of property you have. Now, this is important for landlords because, and I'm going to go ahead and just get all of them on the screen for now. So the first thing, of course, is a lease. It has to be in the client's name. So with signatures from the client and the landlord, and it has to be dated. I've seen a lot of leases where the client didn't sign or the client signed and the landlord didn't sign. It would have to have both signatures and a date on there. Rent reasonableness and fair market rent assessment will be done by the staff at the agency. They'll complete those things. So that's nothing that you all will have to worry about. And they will contact you if there's an issue with either of those. Now, the habitability inspection, I have a link here because I want to show you all the form. This is something that the agency will also complete, but they'll have to come inspect your property. And so I wanted to show you what this form looks like. And again, this will be available to you. You can always go on our DCA website to view this form as well, but I wanted to go over it with you all on this call. So this is the habitability inspection checklist. And so as you can see, these are some of the things that the agency will be looking at to make sure it's approved, or if, it's not quite up to standard or code, then they'll, let you know. But for structure and materials, just making sure it's structurally sound, just protect the resident from hazards, access, making sure it's easily accessible and things like that. Those types of standards. And I'm not going to read all of these, but I just wanted to go over a few, like things like the water supply. It must be free of contamination, and there must be, the ability to have running water, the ability to have power. And I know that seems silly, but there have been cases where the power company wasn't even able to put a meter on the house because it wasn't, I guess there are certain things that a house or an apartment complex or whatever has to have, and that was not there. So just those types of things, fire safety, food preparation, we want them to be in a place where they can store, prepare, and serve food in a sanitary manner. So they'll need a stove, a refrigerator, and things like that. Now, I will say that if you have a property where the tenant is responsible for the refrigerator, I've seen that in a lot of cases. That is also something that they can work out with the agency. It's on a case-by-case basis. Some agencies may be willing to assist with that, some may not. But I do know I have seen that regularly, that some properties require the tenant to provide their refrigerator. And so these are just some of the things. Of course, you all can go through this at your leisure, read through it. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me after this meeting, after you've read this. But this is one of the forms that you will see if you partner with, if you partner with an agency. Another form I'm sure you all may be familiar with is the lead-based paint forms. And I say form, but it's multiple forms, any structure built before 1978. And it's especially required for children under 6 or pregnant women. And like I said, it's multiple forms. But I just wanted to let's say I'll click on one that you can see. This is a screening worksheet. And again, these are things that will be needed for the tenant to be able to move into the property. They'll go through, and was the property leased or constructed before 1978? They'll check that off. Will a child under the age of 6 be living in the house? They'll check that off. Just basic forms that are required will need to be filled out. And again, I'm not going to read through all of this, but these are forms that will require a signature and a date, and that they'll have to go through before the tenant or the client will be able to move into the property. Uh-oh. I don't know why that keeps popping up. The next form, which is very important for the landlords, is the rental assistance agreement form. This is a form that you'll need to fill out. It's not a long drawn out, and I'm showing you all these forms, but I do want to just let you know this process is not a long, complicated process. It's pretty simple. A rental assistance form, you'll go through this. It's almost as if it's a lease, but this is an agreement between the landlord and the agency that you're working with. So you see here, the agency name would go here, the owner of the property, the tenant's name. You'll provide the address, how much the rent is each month, if there are any late fees, the dates of the lease agreement, things like that. And then, there are some other issues. There are some other things here that you can read through, and we'll also go over the VAWA protections. I'll go over that with you next. And that's just another agreement between the landlord and the tenant and the agency. And then you'll, sign off on it. This form is literally almost like a lease, but it's the agreement between you and the agency that just provides the information that the agency would need. Let's see if this is going to come up. Let me close that. There we go. Final form, I just mentioned a Vawa lease addendum. And so this is a form that I like to go over because many landlords are a little skeptical about this. The Vawa is the Violence Against Women Act. And this addendum, it just shows the terms of the lease between the owner and the tenant, the dates. And it's basically saying that the owner shall not evict or otherwise deny assistance to a tenant on the basis or as a direct result of the fact that the tenant is a victim of domestic violence or any type of, violence, sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, anything like that. The owner shall not deny tenancy or occupancy rights solely on the basis of criminal activity directly relating to domestic violence. So, if there was an issue or something that you find on the background check and it's related to that, it's saying to not deny that individual occupancy or tenancy. Or, and you can go through this to determine if you have any specific questions. And when I'm finished, if you have any specific questions, but the VAWA agreement is literally just a protection for the people who are going through or experiencing any type of domestic or dating or sexual assault or any type of violence, that this should not deny that person occupancy or tenancy. So this is what this agreement is, and this is one of the required forms for anybody that is going to be residing in one of your properties. This form is required. And so here is another thing that I wanted to bring up. This is our interactive map. I'm going to wait for it to load. Okay, so as you can see on this map, it's color coded, and I'm not sure where everyone is from, but you can click on this map and it's color coded by counties or agencies, by counties and agencies. So here on this side, you'll see it'll show you which agency covers which counties. So, you see the blue here would be 9th District. That's going to be this area, that northeast. Let me scroll up here. So let's just say if you're in Hall County, you could call 9th District and say, hey, I attended a presentation. I know that you all are one of the agencies that is receiving the Esg Cv grant. And so I'd like to let you know I'm a landlord. I own property in this area. If you have any individuals that you'd like me to work with regarding housing and placement, I'm available. Let them know that you understand the forms, you've been able to ask questions, and that would be a great help, because the biggest issue we have is that we've got more individuals experiencing homelessness than we have properties available to them. And so also, I don't know if you're in the Troup area, the Troup County area, you have Volunteers of America. If you go here and you're in, I'm not really familiar with this part of the state, but let's just say Richmond County, then you've got CSRA. It also has a contact name and a number in her email. You could reach out to Ms. Beard and say, hey, I have property in, 3 of these counties that you cover. If you have anyone interested, I have properties in those areas. DeKalb and Fulton. When you click here, these 2 agencies, especially North Georgia Angel House, is no longer an agency. We're working with the department to get that removed from the map, but we have another list available to you all that has all the current agencies, their contact information, and the counties that they cover. So this is just a resource for you all. If you just want to look around and see what's available in each county. You may have property all over the state. And so if you have properties in Valdosta, there's nothing listed here, but I can tell you Viewpoint Health is an agency that covers that county. That'll be on that list we see. But you may also have property in Columbus and Muskogee County. And so in Columbus, you have United Way of the Chattahoochee Valley, and you can contact them. So I just wanted to show this map to give you all an idea of how the agencies are spread across the state. And then this is a resource for you to go back and see and look at, later. And this is just a list of some other program resources. This is our DCA website, the ESG program, and it's also ESG CV. You can click on this and then you'll just, navigate through safe and affordable housing, emergency solutions grant. There are lists of forms. You can find out more about the program, all of those things. I have HUD here. So you can go on the HUD Exchange and look at their information and their requirements and policies, the National Alliance to End Homelessness. They have a lot of great statistics out there. And then the Georgia Housing Search. You can view current landlords. And if you want your properties to be listed on this Georgia Housing Search, you can upload and list your own properties there. There's a process, but you can go to this site and upload your properties there. And that is all I have. I know that was probably a lot of information, but if you have any specific questions, the floor is open.
Yes, thank you so much, Arlena. So, like I said, sorry if anyone's experiencing technical difficulties, but this information in the forms will be sent out. But realize it will take a few days to potentially digest all of this. It's a lot of information, a lot of forms, but as Arlena had mentioned, it really is pretty streamlined because it's not necessarily an application, but you'll be working with a partnering agency. So you all will be working in tandem and working together. So it really is an excellent opportunity, and there are funds available for this if you do qualify. So I encourage you to at least contact that partnering agency, and we'll send out, can we send out the map? We'll send out the map, Arlena, or can we send out that Excel spreadsheet with the different agencies?
We can actually send out both. That map, there's a link there. And then we can, in addition to the map, send you the list of agencies. I mean, it's perfectly fine. I've spoken to the agencies. It's all on their website. So it's public. So it's okay for you to reach out to them. We just created that list to kind of streamline it so that you don't have to go through a lot of hoops and talk to people in different departments. So when you get that list, it'll have the person associated with the ESG CV program. They can provide you with, detailed information. One thing that I didn't mention is each agency also has their own criteria, policies, set of rules. And so, like I said, if you have properties all over the state, one agency may say, yes, we do it. This is our criteria. And one agency may say something different, but the common thing is they all have to have those required forms I did show to you guys, and they all provide those financial services that I went over with you all. And so if you encounter anything with an agency, you're a little confused, you can still give me a call. I can, walk you through it. I can also give the agency a call if there's some confusion. So don't worry about that. As Brian stated, we know it'll take some time for you to read through these forms, digest everything, but we're here to answer your questions if you have any.
Absolutely. And there is a question from Judah. She said, awesome presentation. Is it one person per property?
Well, it depends on the type of property you have. So if it's a multifamily dwelling, then, you can have multiple families. And if it's, so say if you have a house and you want to do a room situation, like maybe rent a room to this individual and rent a room to this individual, I think that would be at the discretion of the agency. There are certain stipulations based on HUD, but like I said, it's a case-by-case situation. Some of the agencies allow that if that is how your home is designed to, rent out rooms or whatever the case may be. But I would say speak to that agency, give us a little bit more information about how you'd like that home to be utilized, and we can go from there. But it is possible. We have people who rent rooms. As long as they have access to the kitchen, a bathroom, and things like that, it's possible.
Yeah, that's a great question. And Arlena, so the current landlords that we have, so we have some shelters, landlords that own housing, own their own structure. So just a sort of a hodgepodge of different type programs.
Right.
And Patricia Collins has a question. If you want to unmute yourself, Patricia. Or if you want to put your question in the chat box.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mr. Bryant, Miss Arlena. I am listed with the Macon Bib agency, and I have been since December. However, the point of contact there, Mr. Baker, he informed me that there are a lot of homeless people. However, they qualify. However, their income doesn't correlate with what they have in line. So therefore, he cannot send them out because he doesn't want to put them in a situation where they're only there for a short period of time and can't pay later on. So that's what I'm dealing with right now.
Yes, so there are AMI requirements, which is the
Mhm.
area median income. And so that may be what he's speaking of, or he may be saying that, hey, this person makes $10 an hour. The rent there is $1,600 a month. If we help them for 6 months, will they be able to continue to, upkeep the property, pay their rent, pay their utilities, etc. And it depends on the person's hardship, but they can get assistance up to 12 months. He's probably looking at it like, well, what happens at the end of 12 months? What happens after the year is over? Are we still going to be able to assist them? And so we do run into those types of problems, and agencies work it out however they see, best, whatever they think is the best solution to that problem. We leave that up to the agencies, but that is an issue. And we do have a lot of HUD policies that we have to adhere, and it makes it difficult for a lot of, individuals. And we hate that, but we have to abide by some of their, by all of their policies. And so sometimes their income can be a factor, all of those things. But if that person is currently residing in a property and they're trying to prevent eviction or homelessness, we have other programs. You'll see when you go to that GCA website, we have other housing programs that may be more appropriate for the individual, something like a voucher. Because if they're making that, then maybe they can find a property that goes based on their income. So there are other options. His particular program may not be able to assist, but if you run into something like that, there are some other agencies that I can link you with, or maybe I can, direct you to a website where they can fill out a Section 8 or what's the other word? It's Section 8, but they're vouchers, the housing voucher program. So there are other options for those individuals if you come across anyone that's experiencing that. We can try to help out in many different ways.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, very
You're welcome.
helpful. And this, I was going to ask this question, Arlena, to clarify. Judah had also asked, has the program's funding been secured for multiple years, or is it year by year? Yeah, that's one question. And typically someone will go in for, what is the average time of months someone will be in an individual experiencing homelessness will be in the program? I know it can be up from 3 to 12 months. I guess there's two questions.
Yeah, so for the amount of time that an individual can be in the program is up to 12 months. And they can also get assistance for up to 6 months of arrears. So, if you have someone who is experiencing homelessness because they were evicted and, they need those utilities that were turned off or anything like that paid, or if they want to stay in that property, we can assist up to 6 months. But if a person is coming in and needing a new place to live or coming from a shelter, then we can assist them for up to 12 months. That it's also something that's determined by the agency. Some agencies say, hey, we'll assist this person as long as they're experiencing a hardship. They always have an individualized case plan. And so they base, how they help that individual, the amount of time on that plan, the individual's needs, their jobs, location, etc. And some agencies may even say, you'll pay 30%, the tenant will pay 30%, we'll pay the other 70%. They may say, we'll pay the full amount for the first 3 months. Let's see how their job is going. And that sets the individual up to succeed, because they'll say, hey, I know in the next 3 months, I'm going to have to start paying 30% of my rent. So I need to make sure that I'm saving my money. I need to make sure that I'm making good financial choices, etc. And then that sets them up so that after 12 months, they say, hey, I know I can pay my rent moving forward. We've developed a plan. I've worked with my case manager. I have a little bit more knowledge about how to be financially responsible, all of those things. And so it's a case by case basis, but each agency does it differently. But overall, they can assist up to 12 months, even with the utilities.
Yeah, excellent question. And you mentioned this the other day, Arlena, that housing, you have a lot of experience in working with individuals and families experiencing homelessness, and the funding was limited, but the funding is essentially flush for at least the next year or two.
Right. This program initially was going to be for a couple of years, but that's when they first, started the CARES Act. We were all new to this pandemic. We weren't really sure what was going to happen. So now over time that we've been able to, hold on, is that me with the loud?
Yeah, if you're not speaking, if you could please mute.
Okay, there we go. So now that there is a little bit more information out there, we've been doing this program now for about 2 years. HUD has announced that this program will continue. It'll continue beyond September 30th, which was the initial, end date. Now we know we have tons of funding. The money is there. That's why we wanted to link with landlords who have properties, because the money is available for these agencies to assist clients. If they find that they're getting an influx of clients and they need more money, there are things that we can do. We can talk to HUD. I can talk to the leadership here to provide more funding if needed. So that is not an issue. This will be ongoing until they tell us no. But I know for a fact we have at least a couple more years to provide this funding, if not more.
So that's excellent. It really is a win-win for the community and individuals and families experiencing homelessness and the agencies. And so we're hoping we can thread the needle and this can work out for you all. Are there any other questions or comments? I realize it can be challenging if you're on the phone, and with these calls, it can be challenging. Christopher, did you have a question? Christopher Jones.
Oh, how you doing, Brian?
Good. I think you're logged in here twice, so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you may have to type in your question. I see somehow you're logged in twice.
Okay.
If you don't mind. So we can wait for Christopher to come in and ask that question. Yeah, it looks like unfortunately he was logged in here twice, and I'm not sure how to. I don't want to remove him from the meeting. So he's typing in his question. And we did have a question. Is it initials PJ? Did you have a question? Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Hi,
Okay,
Brian and Arlena. This is Tammy. I have a quick question for you.
yes,
Okay.
Thanks so much, first of all, for this presentation and this information. How is there a process for I guess, a landlord to become an approved housing provider, if you will? Like, does the partner agency have an application for someone interested in being a landlord, or a provider for folks who need, a place to live? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. So all you would have to do is, reach out to one of the agencies in your area, let them know that you're interested in becoming a landlord for the Esg Cv program. What they're going to do is, they'll go over some things that are agency specific, specific to their agency. And then they're going to have you fill out those forms. They'll come out, they'll inspect the property. They'll do, I don't know if you remember that habitability. Well, are you on a call, or were you able to see? So one of those forms
I was able to see.
Okay, so one of those forms, the habitability form, they'll fill that form out. So that means they'll come out, do an inspection of the property, make sure it meets that standard and, that criteria. And then, you all can draft a lease and a rental agreement, and then you'll sign that Vawa addendum agreement, and then you'll be able to have that person in your property. And like I said, to just, kind of ease some of your concerns, they will get case management. Every individual that
That's great.
is serviced by the ESG Cv program receives case management. So they're not going to just throw them in your property and say, okay, we'll give you a couple of months of rent, goodbye. They're going to make sure they're checking in at least once a month. That's the least that they can check in. They're going to make sure that they're making sure that that tenant has their needs met. If they, any major changes, all that has to be reported to the agency. So I stress that to the landlord so that you'll understand this person will be receiving multiple wraparound services while residing in your property. And once they're discharged, there's a plan. They're not just discharged and say, see you bye. There's a plan in place to say, hey, after 6 months, you'll be discharged, but this is what's going to happen. And if a hardship continues, then maybe we can continue to provide assistance. So those are just some of the things that I like to stress to the landlords and property owners so that they understand this is going to be something that is monitored closely, all those types of things.
So if I identify, let's say I identify a person who is in need of housing, does that person, the tenant, have to reach out to the partner agency, or do I just let the partner agency know, hey, there's a person that's interested that needs housing and I have a room or I have a house and I can provide that? What's
Either
that
way,
process?
you can or the tenant, but there is a screening process completed by the partner agency to determine if that tenant is a good fit and to determine if they meet the criteria, of the ESG Cv program. And so they'll contact the tenant or call them in, whatever their COVID practices are, and they can at that point evaluate and screen the tenant and then determine if they meet the criteria for the program. After they have done that, then they will say, okay, we can place them in the property. In the meantime, if that tenant does not have a place to live, if they have that emergency shelter project type, they can house them in, they can house them in a hotel motel or something like that until everything has been confirmed, that they meet your criteria, that they've come out, because they're going to have to come out and inspect the property and all that. That could take a little time. So we don't want the individuals to be homeless during that process. So they can be placed in a hotel motel until that process is completed. But either way, you can reach out to the agency, the tenant, because either way, the tenant will have to go through a screening process.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Very, very good questions. Thanks, Tammy. We have another question. Ms. Brooks, I have 3 short-term rentals that are fully furnished. Would like to know if there's a way to get compensated for the furniture, or would they have to remove everything?
I would say that would be on a case-by-case basis, depending on the agency, because the agency may have funding from their, agency specifically where they'll be willing to pay for the furniture. From an ESG Cv standpoint, I don't know if we pay for rent and then also furniture. I don't think that is like something that can be combined. I can get a little bit more clarity on that, because from my understanding, there would you wouldn't be compensated for the furniture. You'd be compensated for the rent, or, if you say that the furniture is a part of the rent, something like that, maybe, but that's going to be a case-by-case basis. And we'd have to check in with the agency, because like I said, the agencies are receiving ESG Cv dollars, but they also have funding from other funding sources. So they may be able to compensate you for that, based on another funding source. So that's going to be a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, another good question. And here's another one. I have a tenant who's experiencing difficulty paying for rent due to a dangerous situation with her boyfriend. Can she receive assistance?
If the agency in your area has homelessness prevention or homeless prevention, if she's already in a property and she wants to remain in the property, homeless prevention will pay up to 6 months of rental arrears. But if she's, experiencing she's in some type of danger and wants to leave the property, then yes, the program can find other housing options for her or her family if she has children or whatever, and place her somewhere else. This program can do that. She would probably go through emergency shelter first, get housed immediate, that immediate housing. And then while, even if your property is available, they'll have to come in, do the inspection, all of those types of things. And then she could be placed there through rapid rehousing. But either way, she has options to get assistance.
Good question. And then Mr. Jones, who was going to speak, and unfortunately wasn't able to because of the technical difficulties. Does the program accept room share candidates or just one per room?
Now, it would have to be one per room, but the question that I have is, I think as long as we have people who rent out rooms, but the tenant has to have access to bathrooms, shared areas like the kitchen, places for them to store, prepare their food, all of those. But I'm not sure. I don't think that there could be like 2 per room. Say if it's 2 adults per room, maybe if they're married or something like that. But if it's like 2 separate, adults in 2 separate situations and they wanted to share a room, I don't think that it's possible. But like I said, that would be something that'll be a case by case basis. Marriage, I believe, yes, because you wouldn't separate a husband and a wife or, whoever. But I don't think 2 separate individuals in separate situations can stay in the same room. They would have to have different rooms.
Okay, and then Ms. Cullens, are sex offenders eligible for the program?
Okay, so the sex offender question is one we have gotten multiple times, and this is the trickiest, most difficult population to place. Each sex offender has different stipulations, and so that is definitely going to be up to the agency. However, they're not excluded from the program simply because they're a sex offender. It would all depend on the placement of the property because some have to be so many feet away from churches, schools, parks, things like that. And it'll also be up to the agency to see if they can find placement. So if your property is one, I know years ago I worked with a pastor who purchased a property in a specific area because it was, when we were working with probation officers in the jails, they wanted him to have openings because it met that person's criteria. Like, it was the right distance from schools, parks, churches, and things like that. And so they were able to live there. Those types of properties are far and few in between. And so we welcome people who have those properties and who actually welcome sex offenders into their properties. That is going to be tricky because it's all on a case-by-case basis. It depends on what their stipulations are, what the conditions of their probation or parole or whatever the situation is are. That's how we'll determine if that person meets the criteria for the program.
Good question. And of course, you all know I work with that reentry partnership housing program, and that's why we've opened up that RPH provider. The only providers that can apply are those agencies that can house registered sex offenders.
Mm-hmm.
We have approximately almost 50 RPH providers, and only 1 or 2 is able to house that population. There is another directory called the Thor directory that I think I've sent you all, most of you on the call, that's run through Department of Community Supervision. And I think 1 or 2 of those programs can house that population. So if you have any further questions on agencies, I can send you the contact for that, Patricia. And let's see, is there an application to become an agency instead of a landlord? I think Tavia has been answering the questions, but if you want to also chime in, Arlena.
Yes, so Tavia's right. Her answer, we aren't accepting any new agencies for Esg Cv at this time. So if you want to become an agency that provides all of those services, you would have to do so as a sub grantee, which means for a sub grantee, you would have to partner with one of our current agencies who are already providing these services, and you'd have an agreement with that agency. And then that agency would determine what you're doing, et cetera. And then once you all come to an agreement and everything is etched in stone, then you all would let, DCA know, hey, the partner agency, the sub grantee would say, hey, we have now partnered with PJ's house and they're now going to be a sub grantee. And then you provide us with that agreement between the 2 of you. However, there is a competitive ESG program, and then you could apply for to become an agency for that. That is some information that we can send out to you. I don't have a lot of information on that. I can't provide a lot of information regarding that, but I can send you the link that we are sending to the agencies. But the ESG program is a little bit different. There are some different policies and guidelines. And so I would have to just send that to you if you were interested in that. But for the CV agencies, you'd have to be a sub grantee because we're no longer accepting agencies. And so those are the requirements to be a sub agency. You'll have to meet with, and this is just in reference to Ms. Cullens, you'll have to meet with our sub grantee and talk to them and see what their requirements are. From a DCA standpoint, we're just going off of HUD requirements. So as long as you meet that criteria, when you are enrolling individuals, they meet the homelessness definitions, and you're carrying out those project types the way that they're supposed to be, then you could become a sub grantee. But it all depends on that sub grantee agency, if they're willing to bring you on as a sub grantee. And that's how you become an agency. You know, there are proposals. We have a time that you do it, but we're just not accepting any new agencies right now. So you couldn't be in sub grantee. You had to be a sub.
All very good questions. And another question, what role does Department of Corrections play in this, since we're hosting this? They're not a part of this program, so you don't want to confuse it too much, but the main program I work with, Reentry Partnership Housing, that is where we do have a partnership with Department of Corrections, Department of Community Supervision, and the Council of Accountability Court judges. So since the RPH provider application is only open to providers that can house a sex offender participants, that's why we wanted to open up this ESG CV program for potential landlords that were interested in RPH. So they're not part of this. We are trying to work with them to have them refer individuals when they come out to one of these ESG programs, ESG CV programs. They can provide housing, but they're technically not a partner in this. So, and then Tavia, when are applications available, or is this a one-time deal since it's COVID-related funds? Yeah, I think you had sort of answered that, Arlena, with saying that it was extended past this September.
Well, I think she's asking for the applications to become an ESG Cv agency.
Okay.
And so we don't, that is closed. And information about the CDBG rehab funds, that is on the HUD website. And so one of the last slides, the next to the last slide that has other resources, there's 2 HUD links there. If you'll click on it, you can go or type in CDBG rehab funds or grants, and it outlines it. We specifically don't provide the ESG CV or ESG program does not provide those funds. So that's not something that I can provide information about, but I did provide the link because you can go on that link and you can read over all that information. You can also go on the DCA website and see if there are any CDBG grants available. That's just not a part of our program, so we can't provide specific information about that. And yes, the PowerPoint will be sent out to everyone. Now, regarding agencies opening applications, the agency doesn't have a time when they open applications for sub grantees. If you want to become a sub grantee, or an agency, you'll reach out to that agency and ask them if they're willing to partner with you and work with you on that. It's completely up to them. We can't require it. It's completely up to that agency to determine if, you know, and I always say, especially those agencies and shelters and everyone who's already implementing these programs, the pitch to the agency could be, hey, I'm already implementing these programs. We just need additional funding to do so. We've got a very large population of homeless individuals experiencing homelessness in our area. And I feel that if I had more funding, I could be of more service to this community. Can we partner with your agency through the ESG Cv program, you know, et cetera. And that is how you can partner with them. We can't require it. And I don't believe any agency has an open time when they're just accepting applications. It's just going to be a matter of reaching out to them, explaining what your goals are and what you're trying to do, and seeing if they're open and willing. And if you would like for me to be a liaison, link you to that agency, you know, we're going to provide you with their contact information and you can reach out to them to ask about that.
Yeah, excellent questions. I know we're running up to the end of our time. Did you have another question, Patricia, or was that your hand up from earlier? It looks like I may have already been answered. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. My name is Brittany Green. How are you all doing this morning?
Fine, Brittany. Thank you for joining.
A 3-bedroom home access, and maybe they can't find a family to occupy that home, and a mother who is homeless or a father who is homeless with a child. How would the compensation be? Would it be the parent lives in one room and the child lives in another room and be compensated for 2 rooms, or, you know?
I think, again, this is going to be a case by case basis, but if you have a mom and a child, that would be one lease, and the child would be on the lease as a resident in that property. But especially if that child is under the age of 18, then it'll be a parent and a child, or, like a mom and a child, a dad and a child, and there will be one lease with both people added as tenants. There'll be one lease with a tenant, and then that child will be listed as, just a resident of that property. But whatever the rent is for that property would have to be listed on that lease. So I think what you're asking is if there'll be 2 separate leases, like if you'll be compensated for this room and compensated for that room. And the answer is no. Whatever the rent is for that property for a single family, that's what you'll be paid. So, if you want to base the rent on what you feel like you should be compensated for, both for 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, or 3 bedrooms and 1 bath, then you'll just say, okay, well, the rent for this property is $1,200 a month, or the rent for this property is $800 a month. And we'll just go from there.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
How would that work if because these were former RPA, I'm sorry, let me take my mask down. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So how would that work? Because and I may be assuming this incorrectly, so RPH people correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming this is like group home setup. So if they were signed up with RPH, they were intending to rent their spaces out by room, by body count. So how does that transition into families renting spaces?
So a few things. The RPH providers were the call on Monday. These are landlords that have different types of properties: houses, apartments, maybe mobile homes, group homes, etc. Now, if it's a group home or personal home setting, that's a little bit different, because you have to rent it by room and they have to have a lease. So whatever is on that lease as the amount that person has to pay to rent that space, that's what they'll pay. Normally, if you're in a group home, then a mom and their child will be in the same room. That's how it normally works. But for a permanent housing situation, normally group homes and personal care homes, you have to meet a certain criteria medically, either, a mental health diagnosis, some type of medical diagnosis, or some type of something that has been deemed a disability, or the need for that supervised or semi-independent living structure. That's normally how that works. So people who can just live independently don't normally live in like group homes and personal care homes. It's people who require some type of supervision or additional assistance, be it medical, physical, whatever. So if it were a group home setting, it would be one person per room. So that's how that works. Like it wouldn't be 2 adults per room, unless the room is a certain square footage, if it's been approved to house 2 people in that room, and then whatever that person is charging for that space, that is what will be paid, but it has to be on that lease rental agreement. For example, when I worked for DBHDD, and people would get discharged from the hospital to a personal care home or a group home, there may be 2 people in one room. There may be 3 people in one room, depending on how big the house is. Whatever the rent is for that space, it has to be determined before they can go there. So that amount has to be determined, and an agreement has to be signed before the client/tenant moves into that property. Does that make sense?
That makes great sense to me, but
Okay.
Everybody who's on the call, please make sure everything, you ask your questions now, whether you have a single family home or group home setup or 7 apartments, whatever the case. Please ask your questions now.
Yeah, good question. So yeah, please let us know. And Arlena, you'll include your contact information and I'll email this out. I will try to send the recording out. I'm not sure if we're able to do that outside of, if you're work outside of DCA. It seems like I've tried that. Is that
Right.
true, Arlena?
I think so. I think it's, if they're like, if they were partner agencies or if they were,
Yeah.
I think so. That would be, I would ask Carmen just to make sure. But even if the recording is not available, if you think of questions you have, like sometimes you'll read through these documents and say, wait a minute, this doesn't make too much sense. Or she said this, but this is confusing. Call me and let me know. If it's something RPH related, I'll definitely get with Brian because he's the expert in that subject matter, on that subject matter. And we'll find out one way or the other. You have seen Tavia Ward answering questions, and also Tiffany Weller. They are our Esg Cv Landlord Engagement Specialist. So they could probably answer questions you have regarding like fair market rent reasonableness, things related to that market, or any other questions that you may have. They can also answer your questions. So if I don't know something, I'll reach out to one of them and ask them just to make sure. If it's something that is, sometimes we get these peculiar situations, we can always reach out to HUD and say, hey, we've got a situation that's a little bit different and it's one of those gray areas. And we can ask them to specify if it would be approved or not. So the ultimate goal is to get individuals off the street, right? And into, adequate housing. So if you have the adequate housing available and we run into certain situations that just aren't outlined in those policies and guidelines, we can ask questions. All they can do is tell us no. And if you also run into some situations that are not Esg Cv related, please go visit our website. It has a lot of information about other housing programs that are offered. And that HUD website is a very good resource. It has tons of information about different grants and things like that. So I would encourage you all to read through those and utilize that website. Make phone calls, do those things, because I think that if you have the properties available, we have the individuals who are homeless, we can all work together and kind of get this, get it. I'm not going to say it's going to solve the problem, but we can definitely address it in a much better way, as long as we have people who are willing to partner with these agencies and, just provide that housing for individuals. So again, I am here if you have questions. Feel free to reach out to me via email, phone. All of that is on that PowerPoint slide, both of my numbers and email.
Yeah, and thank you again, Arlena. It was a lot of information, and you definitely are the expert on this. And I appreciate everyone's time and attention on the call and the excellent questions. I will be sending all of this out this week. Like I mentioned, just let it digest a few days, and just let us know if you have any questions. I've always said the roads are out there. We have to build the bridges. So this is an excellent opportunity to make great things happen and to help a lot of families and individuals experiencing homelessness. So thank you again so much for your time. And thank you, Tiffany and Tavia, for being on the call. They started with this a few months ago, and they're learning